Sarah Bedford from the Washington Examiner. She does Overwatch of House Oversight, if you will. And Sarah, Hunter Biden had a op-ed that he put out in USA Today, essentially trying to claim a straw man, like all this is being done because I'm a drug addict. That's not why all this focus on him is being done. In fact, as you note, Sarah, much of what is being talked about as potential criminal activity and subject to potential impeachment for Joe Biden is stuff that he did while sober.
That's right. I mean, just take, for example, joining the board of Burisma, the Ukrainian energy company. That occurred in 2014. And Hunter Biden has been pretty open that after his brother's death the following year, he began a slide towards his big relapse. But, a lot of these decisions that are the most controversial did take place when he was sober. And this is also a completely different defense than the one that we heard Joe Biden, Hunter Biden use for years before, some of their lies on this topic have started to unravel. I mean, recall that while Joe Biden was running for president, the sort of line about defending Hunter was, well, yes, he had a famous last name, but he was a lawyer who went to Yale Law School. He earned these jobs on his own merit. He brought value as an attorney to these companies. Now that we've seen the laptops, now that we've had witness testimony to know that there was really never any services provided except access to Joe Biden, well, that sort of argument doesn't work anymore. So now they're arguing that he was an incapable drug addict. And that argument is directly contradictory to the first one that they tried to defend Hunter Biden from these competencies.
So is it going to work? I mean, it's to me, it seems like a straw man that, House Oversight's not going to buy that. Who's going to buy that? Is this for just media consumption? Who are they trying to convince with this new defense?
Right? Who outside the mainstream media would take this as a credible defense? I mean, so you have two sort of tranches of what Hunter Biden is facing right now, right? He's facing gun charges and potential tax charges that David Weiss, the special counsel, could bring. But he's also at risk of foreign influence charges related to the Foreign Agents Registration Act. He did not register as a lobbyist when he was advocating for all of these companies. So while a drug addict defense might help him in this specific gun trial, and maybe even in some of the tax trials, maybe if charges were brought, he could say, I wasn't of right mind when I forgot to pay my taxes. But it would be really hard and even detrimental in a foreign influence case to make the drug addict argument, because if he really was so incapable of maintaining a functioning adult life, then why were all of these companies paying him millions of dollars? They don't really want to invite those questions. And so this defense is really only helpful in a limited context, not in the broader context of everything Hunter Biden's accused of.
So all this talk from the left saying, more or no evidence, there's not a shred of evidence, it's a big nothing burger. We actually have a $40,000 check, which is exactly 10% to the big guy, right? I mean, that's the latest bomb that dropped this week.
That's right. I mean, remember that the conversations about 10% for the big guy happened in the context of this joint venture that Hunter Biden, James Biden, and other associates were talking about engaging in with CEFC, a Chinese company. This $40,000 check essentially was trickled down from money that Hunter Biden received, a $400,000 infusion in 2017, and then 10% of it, as you mentioned, ended up
to the penny, right?
Right? So that just seems to be a series of amazing coincidences if there's no evidence that Joe Biden was involved, that payments are now being found that support the structure of a Chinese business venture that was discussed. And, I just think at this point, there is no amount of evidence that will convince the mainstream media or Democrats that something nefarious was done here. But the evidence is getting a lot harder to ignore for normal people.
Talking to Sarah Bedford of the Washington Examiner, got about a minute left. So Speaker Mike Johnson's been on the job for about a week. He had a press conference yesterday, said his first week was like living in an F5 tornado. But one of the things he said is he's nearing a decision on what the next steps are in a potential Biden impeachment. Do you have any insight? What's that going to look like?
Well, I know that the committees are continuing their work doing transcribed interviews behind closed doors, right? So we've had various officials from the Justice Department Tax Division, the two U.S. attorneys who were said to have blocked David Weiss from bringing charges in Washington, D.C. and California, and some of these other IRS officials. So those interviews are sort of quietly helping to paint a picture of what went wrong in this investigation. And then House Oversight is going through all of these personal financial records that they subpoenaed from the banks. That's why we're getting bits and pieces of of what they found so far. But as far as a big hearing or a big, spectacle right now, I think this is really sort of in the underground, behind the scenes phase right now, the impeachment inquiry.
You need to read everything that Sarah writes to stay up to date on that angle, because nobody is covering it like Sarah is. You can link to it at Twitter or X, Sarah C. Bedford. That's Sarah C. Bedford. Sarah, thanks for fighting through sick bay and fighting the cold and sticking with me. I really appreciate the effort.